What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. There are 1,000 Pokemon now, so you're going to have a separation at some point of fan favorites that everybody loves, with other ones that just kind of fade into the background. It's fine to leave out some of them, but when it goes on for long enough, these Pokemon get a reputation for being useless, and at that point, the only remedy that people seem to be able to conjure is adding in a new evolution to said Pokemon, or perhaps a regional variant of some kind. But do these changes actually benefit that initial Pokemon that needed the help in the first place? It's hard to say what the best way to lift up older forgotten Pokemon might be, but I'm inclined to say that the newer forms don't fulfill the role that they were meant to, and instead of actually highlighting the poor overshadowed Pokemon, it instead makes them at best a stepping stone to the prize you actually want. I mean, we gotta ask ourselves, does anybody really respect Seadra as its own Pokemon? Or is it just a waypoint on the road to the far superior Kingdra? That's not to say that this kind of thing can't work when implemented well. To me, one of the best ways they've done it is with Stantler. This deer Pokemon was so often overlooked, and it wasn't until Legends Arceus that they did anything about it, giving it the new Weirdeer evolution. But in order to evolve it, you had to actually use the Pokemon in battle quite a lot, spamming its new signature psychic move until it actually becomes a psychic type, actually making you care about your Stantler before it turns into the exciting new form. So that's a win for both the old Pokemon and its new relative. But we do need to ask ourselves, what made Stantler fade so quickly in the first place? Because really, have you all ever tried one in Gold and Silver when it was first introduced? That thing is a battering ram with antlers. Just pick any random normal move and you'll at least two-shot most anything in the mid-game, which is when you're first able to find it. It's like Gen 1 Tauros, but more useful because you can actually get it early enough to use. But if you've never tried it like I did, then it wouldn't even cross your mind. The same thing with the Girafarig that I used in Soul Silver. It was a surprisingly strong Pokemon with a crazy good move pool. So then I was pretty shocked when they decided that it, of all things, needed an evolution from Johto. I mean, you can't seriously tell me that Girafarig needed a power boost more than Furret or Ledian. I get that maybe these initial Pokemon aren't as strong as they used to be given the power creep, so then maybe that is the main reason they do need extra evolutions. However, then perhaps a new form is what's needed instead, because regional variants have been used across the past 3 generations, and they are still pretty popular, so maybe that is actually working. We already mentioned how Tauros used to be a terror in Gen 1, but then hundreds of Pokemon later have kind of dulled its edges. However, today, multiple forms of Tauros are found amongst the top ranks of the VGC teams, at least according to the data that I've found. Now, does that actually help the Tauros that we used to know when the original can't even be found in the region? That's debatable. This clearly doesn't always work since Megas appeared to elevate certain Pokemon to the limelight, but how often did we see standard Beedrill being used after its Mega was introduced? And now, since Megas have been removed completely, how often have we seen it ever again? And the same thing with the Gigantamax Butterfree. So obviously the one-off gimmick forms are not the answer to bringing a Pokemon into prominence in a permanent fashion. But other forms might work out better. Marowak got a pretty big push, and it helped them a lot, without really crossing over the original. But then of course there are other instances like Raichu. In 2016, Raichu was among the top 25 most prominent Pokemon used in VGC tournaments. Then Sun and Moon came out and gave it an Alolan form that was part Psychic type, and then it was suddenly nowhere to be seen. Granted, that may just be from being outclassed by other strong electric types like Tapu Koko or Xurkitree, so that doesn't prove that Alolan Raichu is worse, and that's not even what I'm trying to say. But it does prove that the new form was not enough to help the already thought of original Pokemon, so then what do you expect it to do for the forgotten ones? But I feel like the new evolution or form change to overtake the original Pokemon is far from the only answer. We did mention Stantler earlier, so instead of a new evolution, they could have simply given it that cool new signature move, and then that could have done a lot by itself. It certainly did wonders for Heatmore when they gave it the unique Fire Lash 2 generations later, and moves are not the only way to do this either. dozens of Pokemon get their stats boosted across generations just because they weren't good enough before, and some of them get new abilities to open up whole new worlds of battling potential. One of the best examples of this is probably Azumarill, who got both the huge power ability and of course the new fairy type, taking it from being a random water rabbit novelty from Gen 2 and uplifting it to be a serious threat to watch out for. Now I know they're not likely to shift types flippantly between games, at least not without adding new ones at the same time, but Clefable saw a similar boost in popularity when it became a pure fairy, setting it apart from Chansey in a different niche. However, since we're on Chansey, we should point out that sometimes an evolution can, in fact, benefit the original to become more popular, in this instance because of the Eviolite. Maybe an even better example of this is Dusclops. He was a fine ghost before, don't get me wrong, but once his defenses were able to shoot through the roof, he became far more common, and I would say even more so than his evolution. But even then, there are other Pokemon that are now nearly interchangeable in terms of usefulness because of this feat. However, when you think about it, this is kind of the exact thing that I've been talking about. The Eviolite didn't exist until Gen 5, so in practice, it is basically just a stat change between generations. So if they were able to focus on that a bit more and adding new abilities or moves or possibly even types, then that could shake up old Pokemon in a more convenient and permanent way than waiting for an evolution in a decade that will also just eventually get pushed out due to the ever-expanding power creep. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying to stop either forms or new evolutions, because I thought the likes of Kleavor, Hisuian Voltorb, Overqwil, and more were quite frankly brilliant. But then Scarlet and Violet threw regular old Quillfish back in the mix with no better typing or even possibility to evolve. And the same happens with Corsola. I wouldn't say that Corsola fixed the base Pokemon that we had for decades, it more just outright replaced it for a bit, which is too bad for fans of the original Pokemon that's still left to struggle. The new Paradox forms are especially guilty in this regard, since they're all single stages and don't actually evolve in any way. Meaning that instead of addressing any problems that Donphan might have accumulated over the years, or at the very least getting you to try it out and use it for an extended period to grow together and bond with your Pokemon waiting for your valuable prize, you just go straight for Great Tusk or Iron Treads, leaving the original Michelin Mammoth in the dust. That's not to say that Donphan was in the most dire need of attention, which really calls into question how they decide these things. When Dunsparce gets a full evolution, whether or not it actually helped, it will at least get you to use a Dunsparce in your journey. Unlike Delibird that just got outright replaced with a literal upgraded version, meaning that you never have to touch the original. I'm really just not getting how they choose which Pokemon get which kind of help, or at the very least how they're chosen in the first place. Like, how in the world was Sunflora not on the list of numerous Johto Pokémon to get either a regional variant, evolution, or even Paradox form in Gen 9? Quagsire was already a useful Pokemon, now it just got another useful offshoot, while Pokemon like Xatu and Jumpluff are just as wanting for attention as ever with nothing to show for it. However, if those lacking flyers were able to get a boost in their stats or abilities, they might stand a chance. If you love both forms of Executor or all the stages of Mr. Mime, then that's great. However, most people are not going to instantly love an older Pokemon just because there's a cool new replacement on the market. But then again, sometimes that is all it takes, like with the amazing Gliscor, not only making Gligar more appreciated, but also more prominent in battle itself. So there's just no way of knowing. Let me put it this way. In the current VGC environment, right near the top is King Gambit. So that's pretty cool that it's brought back some relevance to that line. But back in Gen 5, Bisharp itself was among the top ranks. Yet this new blood did not bring Bisharp back into the fold. However, if you look back at the list, right below King Gambit is Pelipper. Not a Pokemon with any shiny new revamps in design, just a simple raise of its special attack and a gift of a new ability in Drizzle during Sun and Moon made this Pelican a force of nature. So the same thing could happen again with simple alterations to other past Pokemon. Further down the list we see Annihilate, who is a super strong and intimidating new Pokémon with a phenomenal typing that is unique outside of a mythical, so it is well deserved to be so popular. But just below that, with basically equal numbers of use, is Murkrow, a Pokémon from the turn of the century that should even be overshadowed by its own evolution. But the possible huge defense buffs and the prankster hidden ability make it so that it's able to stand toe-to-toe with the big guns. So then who's to say if the way they've been handling updates actually works? It sure is flashy and good publicity, but it doesn't always seem to last, usually having that new Pokémon become outdated in just a few years. So maybe we need to adjust our thinking. I mean, it may have been cooler at the time if Flygon had gotten a Mega Evolution, but perhaps it's better in the long run that it didn't, so that we can get a longer lasting leg up like better stats, or maybe a new hidden ability, or maybe even a signature move after all these years. Then again, Pokemon like Crobat and Togekiss are still popular and dominant in battle, so it's more likely to be a case-by-case basis. But they really shouldn't be so stingy about doling out these less advertised avenues of improvement, even resorting to changing types once again if necessary. Otherwise, what's the alternative? Every Pokemon ever eventually becomes a 3-stage line? Because really those small tweaks are all that are needed to give a reason for players to try them out. Then all you would really need is the opportunity. So maybe the reason nobody's tried out so many of these Johto Pokémon is because you made them so hard to find in the first place. Or they were simply just far too late to make a difference. Maybe instead of making Ursaluna at all, we really just needed to find an early route Teddiursa, maybe with 10 more points in attack, so that it could make us rejoice that these older Pokemon were actually receiving recognition from the official overlords. But then again, that would make me part of the problem for largely only going after new Pokemon in the games. But I do think that I'm onto something here, and that some Pokemon just aren't suited to such a drastic rebrand. But do you think that this is the best way to fix past forgotten Pokemon? And are these evolutions and forms actually helping the Pokemon that need it in the first place? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.